Hello everyone and welcome to my home, and today I'm going to show you how to make a really traditional bake. This is something that is traditionally eaten around Easter time. It's quite British, although I know that there are some other countries that partake, and it is a recipe for hot cross buns. Now before I get going, I just want to remind you, in case you didn't know, that I'm going to be in the Crumbs Doilies shop in Soho this Saturday. That's Easter Saturday, from 11 until 3 for a meet and greet. So if you're around, please come on down. I'll tell you a bit more about that later. But for now, let's talk hot cross buns. Now, if you are from a place where they have never heard of hot cross buns, or even if you're from here and you still don't really know what they are, this is going to be the best day ever for you because they are so great. They're traditionally a kind of enriched dough bun, and they are lightly spiced, and they quite often have fruit in them, and they're also really recognizable by their cross on the top. And originally these were created for the end of Lent, and if you want to know more about that history, then go and Google it. It's really simple and it's a really quick dough. I'm going to be using a freestanding mixer. You can do this by hand though, so don't panic. It'll just be a little bit messier. Sorry. I'm going to start by putting my dry ingredients into my mixing bowl. So I've got 500 grams of strong white bread flour. And to that, I'm going to add 10 grams of instant dry yeast. Now, this is the kind of yeast that you don't need to activate first because it's already sort of activated. It's just dry. If you're using a different kind of yeast, just follow the instructions on the packet for that. I can't get involved in that here because I'm using instant dry yeast. So just whack that into the bowl as well. I've also got 2 teaspoons, that's 10 grams of salt. And I've got some sugar. I've got 50 grams of caster sugar. And now it's time for the spices. Now, traditionally you would use mixed spice, which, if you don't know, that is a mixture of cinnamon, nutmeg and cloves. But because cinnamon is obviously the king of spices, I'm actually boosting the cinnamoniness. I'm going to put 2 teaspoons of mixed spice and 1 extra teaspoon of cinnamon. So that's all of my dry ingredients, and now it comes to the wet ingredients. Now, as I said, this is an enriched dough, which means that it has, actually enriched dough can mean anything, like you put milk or egg or butter in. This is actually going to have egg and butter in. So I've got 1 large free-range egg. And I'm also going to put in 50 grams of soft unsalted butter. And you want to definitely make sure it is soft so that it can mix in really well. And then lastly, 350 millilitres of water, just at room temperature. So not warm unless you're using a different kind of yeast, but not like super duper cold. And then just bring that all together on a low to medium speed, and it should come into a mass basically. So once the mixture all comes together, you can then turn up your mixer to quite a high speed, so sort of medium to high. And this is going to do the kneading for you, obviously. If you're doing this by hand, this is quite a sticky dough, so just persevere on a lightly floured surface, just kneading it as best you can, although it is quite sticky. So this is going to knead together for about 10 or 15 minutes, but every couple of minutes I'm just going to turn it off and let it rest for 30 seconds just to help the gluten relax. But altogether it's going to be about 15 minutes, and you want to stop kneading it when it's basically coming away from the sides of the bowl. So at the moment it's super duper sticky, and when it's ready it won't be quite so sticky. Right, this is coming away from the sides nicely, and it's super elasticy, and it's almost like a living thing right now. It's awesome. So it's fruit time, and a little bit about fruit. So I am going to be putting in a total of 300 grams of fruity things. It's really up to your preference what combination of fruit you want to use. Obviously, it needs to be kind of dried fruit, so things like raisins, sultanas and currants are traditionally used, and mixed peel. I'm not a massive fan of really juicy, squishy ones, so I don't soak my fruit beforehand. But if you want to soak your fruit, then go ahead. You'd want to do that maybe the night before in some orange juice or even some rum or something like that if you want to have a little kick. And actually, sometimes tea is quite nice to soak your fruit in. But I'm keeping it really simple because I don't like them to be too wibbly. That's just my personal preference. And I am also only using currants and mixed peel. But you could put other things in. You could put raisins, and you could even put chocolate chips or, you know, nuts, although that's not technically traditional. But I've got a makeup of about 100 grams of mixed peel and 200 grams of currants. I'm just going to whack them in. And then on a low speed, just mix that gently together until it seems to be all well combined. It's quite difficult to get an even spread just because the dough is already quite elasticy and the currants kind of struggle to get through it, but persevere and you'll be fine. So this is looking real good. I've got my currants and my mixed peel working their way through the dough. So now it just needs to prove. And this is going to take about an hour initially. There's a couple of stages to rising your dough. The first thing we're going to do is just to put it into a nice big bowl. You know, make sure it is big enough to handle a little bit of growth without the dough kind of spilling over, because the dough is going to double in size. So I've actually lightly greased this bowl just with a bit of sunflower oil. And I'm just going to turn out my dough into the bowl. And then I'm going to cover that with cling film, and it needs to go in a kind of warm place. Now, you might be lucky enough to live in a warm place just generally, in which case you just leave it at room temperature. If you have to manufacture a warm place, if you've got something like a airing cupboard, you know, where your boiler is, that's going to be nice and cozy. Or just the warmest part of your kitchen perhaps, or if you know you're doing some other kind of baking and your oven's on, or maybe near the oven. What I like to do to cheat all of those things is to put it in the oven, but with a tray of just boiled water at the very bottom, with the oven off, or sometimes with the light on, because that also produces a small amount of heat, and that will create just like a cozy temperature. It doesn't want to be too hot, so I'm just going to put that in there for an hour. Oh my God, it's like magic. So my dough has doubled inside and it's all kind of wibbly wobbly. It's kind of like a jelly dough at the moment, which is really fun to wibble about. This next stage is called knocking back. And this basically, what this does is ensure that you get a nice even sort of crumb on your bread. It's going to expel the gases and so activates the yeast activity all over again. It's also going to make the cell structure a bit more uniform. It's also going to strengthen the gluten, and it's also going to even out the temperature, because at the moment it's probably quite warm inside because all the activity's been going on in there, and the cooler on the outside. So just turn it onto a lightly floured surface. And as you can see, this dough is like super sticky, mega Sticksville. So make sure you've got some flour close to hand so you can put it on your hands. And knocking back, you can do this however you like. I like to just kind of fold it in on itself, a little bit like kneading. And you'll notice some of your currants kind of pinging out. Just pick them up and just kind of squish them back in, that's fine. Oh, there's quite a lot of currants in there, so losing a few won't hurt it too much. Obviously this is mega sticky and it's now stuck to my worktop, which is fine. I like to use a dough scraper like this. You can use a cake scraper if you have one of those as well, just to get it off the worktop, and then put it back into your bowl. And then you want to cover that again with cling film once you've cleaned your hands, and put that back in your warm spot for another 30 minutes. I'm back and my dough has proved and doubled in size. So I'm going to turn it out onto a lightly floured surface again. And now it's time for the shaping. So obviously these are going to be little buns. So we're going to need to divide this dough up. Again, it's really helpful to have one of these. If you don't have one of these, you can do it with a knife, or you can even kind of pull bits off, but that's really super duper messy. I want all my buns to be the same size as well. So I've got my scales here. I'm going to aim for about 90 grams for each of my buns. So now we're going to roll this and shape it. So I'm going to tuck all the bottom bits in to the middle and underneath, basically, to create my initial shape. And then again on a floured surface, just pop that on. Make sure you've got sort of lightly floured hands, and you're just going to roll that just to shape it into a nice, neat, tidy bun. And then once you're satisfied that you've got a nice, tidy little bun, you can put it onto a baking sheet. So I've lined my baking sheet with greaseproof paper, and there's going to be 12 buns on this sheet. So you want to make sure that they're spaced about 2 centimeters apart, because While you do want them to stick together in the oven when they bake, so that you get those nice kind of tear away bits on the side, you definitely don't want them to be so close together that they just kind of into each other, into one like blob of hot cross bun, although it would be really tasty, but it wouldn't be very pretty. So make sure you position them nice and far apart. So now just keep going until you've got all your buns on your tray. Right, I actually have a little bit leftover dough, so I'm going to roll this and put it on a different sheet. So before I put these back into my cozy spot to sort of rise, I'm going to actually get rid of some of the currants that have poked their way through, just because when we bake them, they're going to burn, so I don't want that. And then once you've done that, just wrap it, but don't wrap it tightly with cling film. Just sort of lay a bit of cling film over the top. If you can ever find the end of your cling film, I can never think. There we go. So just lay it over the top, and this is just to protect it from kind of creating a skin, which isn't going to be very nice. And you want to put that in your cozy spot for between 20 and 45 minutes, depending on how warm your cozy spot is. If you leave it for too long in too warm a spot, it's going to overprove, and that is going to mean like disaster for your hot cross buns. You'll know if you've overproofed it if you stick your finger on the top of one of your buns and it just kind of disintegrates and doesn't spring back. You want a nice spring back from your touch when it's ready. So keep checking. So they have had about 40 minutes actually in a warm place. I actually didn't put them in the oven because I needed to get my oven hot for baking these guys. So I actually just put them near a radiator, and they have increased in size to the point where they're basically touching or almost touching, which is just right. And if you touch your buns, they should spring back nice and quickly. So they're ready to have their crosses put on. You can do crosses, which is the traditional thing to do, and obviously they're called hot cross buns, so you know that kind of makes sense. If you don't want to do crosses, you can do little smiley faces or all sorts of things, but the way that you make the cross is with a little solution that I'm going to make up now. So I've got 75 grams of plain flour, which I'm just going to put into a bowl, along with 25 grams of oil and 75 mils of water, and I'm just going to use a little whisk to stir that all together. And once it's a nice smooth consistency, it then needs to go into a piping bag. And then just snip the end off, but not too much. Even though the crosses on hot cross buns traditionally, if you've seen them, are, you know, they're usually about a centimetre thick. This spreads out a little bit, so you're not going to be making a centimetre thick cross in the first place, otherwise they're going to be absolutely huge. So just a small amount off the end. And then you want to go across all of your buns at the same time. This is really cool, in a cross formation. So there's my crosses. These are starting to look very much like hot cross buns, but first I need to bake them. So I've set my oven at 190 degrees C, and these need to be baked for between 20 and 25 minutes. Check them at 20 just to make sure you're not overdoing them, and they'll be lovely and golden on the top when they're ready. My buns are out of the oven. They are looking so good, and wow, my kitchen smells amazing. The spices and the buttery dough, oh, good Lord, it smells good in here. But these aren't quite ready yet. As you can see, they're kind of dull. I mean, they look exciting, but they're on the dull side. So we're going to jazz these up with a bit of a glaze. You can do this with a sugar syrup. That's quite traditional as well. I like to do it with apricot jam. So I've actually just warmed up a little bit of apricot jam in a pan. And then while my buns are still warm, I'm going to brush my jam all over the top. Oh my goodness, these look so good. They're really looking like delicious hot cross buns right now. They've got the glaze on. Cannot wait to eat one. So please do take a picture if you guys have made them. Use the hashtag Cupcake Jemma on Instagram so that I can see them. And don't forget that I'll be in the Crumbs Doilies shop in central London in Soho this Saturday. That's Easter Saturday between 11 and 3 o'clock. So please come on down if you're in the area. You'll be able to get your hands on some lovely Easter cupcakes, and there'll be tons of my merch in store. So if you haven't got anything, you can come pick it up in person, as well as getting a high five from me. So I am going to enjoy one of these in the usual way that I like to enjoy them, which is to split one in half, toast it, and then basically put almost as much butter as there is dough onto each side. Make sure it's salted butter, because that is really where it's at. I hope you like these as much as me. See you next week. Mixing bowl. So I've got 500 grams of plain, no. Because obviously, otherwise it's gonna, what? And then put that on a low speed and get it all together.
You need to put the water in it?
Yes, I do. So put your mixer onto a low, oh my God, I've done it again! And now I'm gonna put 50 grams, oh, what?
You've got this, Gemma, come on. Hang on, let's get when I need to compose it.
So it's ready, and it's nice and elasticy, as you can see. It's almost like a, don't know what.
Right, what are you doing? What are you doing?
Warming my hands on my bum. Okay, let's do this.
Let's do this.
In Soho, in central London, this Saturday, that's Easter Saturday, between I just spat everywhere.
Can we have one?
No,
Why?
because there's only 30 and I need them all.
Come on.